Ezra Levant here for Rebel News. I am in our world headquarters in Toronto, Canada, but we have reporters across the country, and for the past few days, we have had a reporter in Israel at the Israel-Gaza border. One of our best journalists, Avi Yamini, based in Melbourne, Australia, has flown to Israel along with cameraman Benji, and they have been on the ground when they went to their first visit yesterday in the town of Strot, which is maybe 1 kilometer, half a mile from Gaza. They were there during a rocket attack. I want to show you that one. And then just an hour ago, they were even closer, and a drone flew overhead. A drone, a Hamas attack drone. Let's start with the Strot video. And I want to show you this because this is world-class on-the-scene journalism. It's what Rebel News does best, having cameras there. And one of our mottos is follow the facts wherever they lead. And it's quite different than you'll get in the regime media, the mainstream media that won't even use the word terrorist to describe Hamas. So without further ado, I want to show you the first video. This is 5 minutes after Avi and Benji arrived at their first destination, their first location. Take a look at this.
Avi Yamini for Rebel News in Strot, southern Israel. We're at the site right now of a direct hit minutes ago. Literally 5 minutes after arriving here in Strot, we heard a loud explosion. What's happened here today?
Today it's what's happened yesterday. They continue to throw the missile, and 3 people injured from the missile here, and we have 20 rockets that land on the town. This is the reality now because we're in a war. As
we drove into this city, a city that only days ago there were terrorists marching the street and butchering anyone in their way, we suddenly heard explosions, having to run for our lives. I didn't hear a warning, and there certainly wasn't 15 seconds to get to shelter, but it didn't hit us. It's about 500 meters from where we were, and unfortunately, there are 3 victims, 1 in a critical condition. I was driving in as it happened, as the explosions. I didn't hear any warning. What was that about?
I don't know. I think I hear a warning, and I ran away. The problem is that everyone, even you, everyone that stay here, every time that they hear something, they need to run and go under the ground or go to a bomb shelter to save their life.
I don't think there was time for me. When we heard the explosions, there was no time.
Avi, you in this situation 1 day. I am in this situation 20 years. I have 7 kids. 7 of my children don't know any reality, any other reality. So, Avi, what you suggest me to do to Hamas in the jihad? If they will do it on your family, in your city, what we need to do? We need to crush them. We need to kill them. They are barbaries. They are organized of evil. They are animals. They killed innocent women and babies, cut their head. They are animals. They are the new ISIS of the world. We need to destroy them. We need to kill them.
The blood of one of the victims and the shrapnel on the wall is evident of what these rockets are able to achieve. 3 injured, at least 1 in a critical condition, 2 in this car and 1 up against that wall. This is the reality that they're living with every single day across the country, but especially here in southern Israel. Avi Yamini for Rebel News in Strot, Israel.
It's incredible to me that almost a week into this war, Hamas is still in a position to be sending that many rockets, that deadly. And of course, they are aimed not at a military base or not at soldiers. They're aimed deliberately into civilian areas. It's a bit of a difference between the Hamas approach, target civilians on purpose, versus the Israeli approach, which is retaliate with as much precision as possible to avoid civilians. But because of this moral difference, Hamas hides their command centers, hides their terrorists themselves amongst civilians. They want their human shields to be killed because that's how they win this asymmetrical war. If it were just a war of tanks versus tanks, aircraft versus aircraft, Israel would be the undisputed champion. But you saw the way they attacked last week. It was almost like a scene out of Mad Max. These little ultralight aircraft, motorcycles, it was go in, massacre as many civilians as possible, kidnap as many back to Gaza, and then get out. And what's Israel going to do with the F-35 Lightning? Israel is one of the few countries in the world with the F-35 stealth fighter. It's an amazing aircraft. I've seen it fly. You don't really, how do you use that? How do you use that when there's a terrorist who doesn't wear a uniform? He's not in a military base. He's not in a tank. He's certainly not in a major aircraft. I mean, what would an F-35 even have done against those ultralights? So that was Avi yesterday. He was in another town today, and he was with Benji, our videographer, and they heard shooting. And then they saw a drone overhead, and it wasn't a little propeller drone that goes bzz, bzz, bzz. It was like an unmanned aerial vehicle, I think would be a better name for it. Here's Avi on the ground today, and watch the drone overhead. Take a look at this.
Avi Mini for Rebel News in Beri, Israel, hundreds of meters from the site of the musical festival in which Hamas hunted and slaughtered, kidnapped and raped partygoers who were there to celebrate peace. Now, at the moment here, things are really tense. Even just standing at the checkpoint, conducting interviews, there was overhead drones, one firing about 150 meters from us.
We are the ones that are...
Slightly shaken from the explosion, we waited a few moments until it seemed like the threat had passed and continued our interview when suddenly shooting began.
and once...
Gunfire.
There's some active launching.
Gunfire.
As we were trying to figure out what was happening ahead, I noticed a drone above and bolted for the bomb shelter nearby. There's a drone.
תנסו להוריד אותו, יש למישהו נשק, תירה בו! תירה בו!
I got it.
למה אתה לא יורה?
Got no visual.
זה מעלת מתאבד, הוא יורד עכשיו בסוללה. מי יורד? באיזה מישהו אחר מאנטארקטיקה?
They're aiming, they're coming back around.
Where's it?
There we go, they're starting to shoot it. It seems like they managed to shoot it down. That's the first time we've been close enough from a shelter to actually get in there in time. But this is the situation here, and it does not look like it's settling down anytime soon. The drone attack today, the rockets yesterday, it all makes it feel very real. And with the looming IDF incursion into Gaza, I worry that it's going to get much worse. So we've decided to urgently order body armor and helmets from America. They arrive on Sunday. They're not cheap. So if you're willing and able to help cover the costs to ensure our safety on the ground here as we tell the truth from the front line here in Israel, head over to thetruthaboutthewar.com. You can see all our stories that we file there, and you can also chip in to help cover the cost. Thetruthaboutthewar.com.
You know, keeping Avi safe is important to me. We were unable to source bulletproof vests in Canada or in Australia in short order. In fact, my understanding is it is actually against the law to wear those things without a permit. I'm not well versed in it, but I've been told that, and I think it's the fact. And by the way, it's hard to get those in Israel right now. You can imagine there's a backlog of people who want them. But it sounds like we have been able to source some body armor from the United States, and hopefully the lads will get those this weekend. It makes me a bit nervous when a lot of people around Avi are wearing body armor and he's not. And you saw our cameraman Benji. I've been to Strot, which is one of those towns right near Gaza, and because it's so close, there's so little time to get into any hardened place, and literally every block is usually a dual-purpose bomb shelter. Like, for example, all the bus stops are partial bomb shelters, because when you have 10 seconds, you've got to go somewhere. And I'm not sure if you can see it there, but it's actually such a bizarre way to live. It's like you were on the moon or on Mars or something, and every 50 feet you would need some place in case you lost your oxygen. I'm just trying to think of some bizarre artificial way to live. That's what Strot is like. I mean, talk about a PTSD generating place to live. Just absolutely terrifying. That the mayor of Strot, who was talking to Avi there, says he's been there 20 years and raised 7 kids there. I can only imagine the psychological challenge of living with rockets and the fear of rockets, and then the worst fear of all, knowing that it finally happened. The terrorists broke through and just walked through the streets massacring people. So Avi is on the ground over there, and he will continue to do his work. The body armor is arriving shortly, and we do want him to be careful. Of course, there's no story worth dying or getting wounded over, but there really is no truly safe place in the country. Rockets have landed in Tel Aviv. Rockets have landed in Jerusalem. Obviously, it's a lot riskier right near the border. What's interesting to me is that the United States is sending 1 and maybe 2 aircraft carriers into the region, and I see that the United Kingdom is sending at least 2 capital ships as well. One of them is a casualty ship, like a hospital ship, and I can't remember what the other one is, but America is sending 2, has 1 aircraft carrier now. Yeah, put that on the screen there. UK to deploy Royal Navy to Middle East to bolster security. And just scroll down a bit. Yeah, that one looks like a hospital ship. I think that's what that is. Let me read a little bit. The UK will send 2 Royal Navy ships and surveillance aircraft to the Eastern Mediterranean in a plan to bolster security, Number 10 says. Number 10 is their version of the White House or 24 Sussex. It comes after 6 days of violence following the surprise attack on Israel by Hamas. The aircraft will begin patrols on Friday to track threats to regional stability, such as the transfer of weapons to terrorist groups. 3 Merlin helicopters and Royal Marines are also being dispatched. The government is also arranging flights for British nationals. So the Brits are sending some ships, but can you call up the American ships? I mean, those are, tracking terrorist shipments and having a few helicopters and some Marines. That's good, but that's not going to deter Iran. That's not going to be that's not going to tamp things down. I think a U.S. aircraft carrier is in a whole different league. Here's CBS News' coverage. The U.S. sends aircraft carrier group to Eastern Mediterranean in response to Hamas attack on Israel. Scroll down just a little bit. I'll read a bit of the story. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced Sunday, so this is actually a few days ago, that he has ordered U.S. military ships, including an aircraft carrier and additional aircraft, to move closer to the Eastern Mediterranean in response to Hamas's unprecedented multi-fronted attack on Israel. At least 9 U.S. citizens were among more than the 700 people killed. We know that the death toll is now around 1,000. I'll skip down a bit. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group includes that aircraft carrier, the largest warship in the world, and the Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser, USS Normandy, and 4 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers. So that is an awful lot of firepower. But I say the same thing I said a moment ago about how do you attack terrorists with F-35. You can have the most awesome warplanes and warships in the world, but the Geneva Conventions on War, to be treated as a prisoner of war, you have to follow the laws of war. What's the difference between a soldier and a terrorist? I mean, what is the difference? It's not just a matter of opinion. There are 3 legal requirements to be treated as a soldier, and thus when you're captured to be given prisoner of war status under the Geneva Conventions. And going from memory, those 3 are, number 1, you are identified, you wear a uniform, you carry your weapons openly. You're not sneaking around like a terrorist or a spy. So number 1, you wear a uniform, you carry weapons openly. That is obviously not the case with these terrorists. Number two, you're part of a formal military chain of command. That may be true here. And number three, you generally follow the laws of war. So you don't rape, you don't murder, you don't kill babies, you don't go after civilians. So Hamas fails 2 out of the 3 tests for being soldiers. They are terrorists, and they are designated as such by the Canadian government and many other governments. The fact that they are terrorists means they are not entitled to the Geneva Conventions for Prisoners of War. I think that's being upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court, which dealt with the legality of Guantanamo Bay on 2 occasions. They said it was legal, is the short answer. But in fact, terrorists are not even entitled to prisoner of war status for the reason I just outlined. So that's the legal issue, but how about it in practical terms? Like, what is the USS Gerald R. Ford going to do against Hamas? I think the answer is nothing. Maybe it'll make sure that Iran or Turkey don't get any big ideas, but I mean, I don't think either would use their formal military to attack Israel. That's the whole point here. They're using their terrorist proxies, Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in the north. I mean, to deter regional instability. Okay, I get it, but what does that mean? It's a show of force. But the USS, and there's the image of it right now. It's quite impressive. That's a lot of hardware. They're not going to be attacking Gaza. How do what you see here, that looks like a ground-based F-15, that's those, and that I think was an F-22. Those are American jets. But what are they going to do? How does that stop someone in a little paraglider, or how does that stop the rockets launched from schools and hospitals? You might find it hard to believe, but the largest hospital in Gaza, the Al-Shifa Hospital, Al-Shifa, is also the Hamas command post. They put their terrorist command post in a hospital. Why do you think they did that? So that if anyone tries to attack the terrorist command post, they wind up killing civilians. Because they know Israel and the West care about that, and they know that it would be wonderful PR. And so you can have 2 aircraft carrier groups. You can have 3. You can have every aircraft carrier in the world. What are you going to do? You're going to attack? Yeah, go ahead and put up one of these stories. That's the Al Jazeera one, which would be downplaying the connection. Google Al-Shifa and then Hamas. I want to show Al Jazeera's, by the way, and I want to show in a minute Anthony Blinken, who was in Qatar, meeting with the dictator there and thanking him. Qatar is where the supreme leaders of Hamas live. They're not in the slums of Hamas. You know what, if you can't find that Al-Shifa thing, don't worry about it. But it's, Associated Press isn't going to emphasize that. Associated Press, Reuters, Al Jazeera, they're not going to mention that Hamas has a command post in the Al-Shifa hospital. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that'll do. Sources, and Haaretz is a far left-wing pro-Palestinian newspaper, by the way. Sources, Hamas leaders hiding in basement of Israel-built hospital in Gaza. Shin Bet chief says militants hiding in Shifa hospital because they know it will not be targeted by Israel. And again, Israel built this hospital when they were in Gaza. As you may know, Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005. Israel does not occupy Gaza. But rather than turning Gaza into a modern, democratic, peaceful, prosperous city like Dubai, it's been turned into a militarized terrorist base camp. Senior officials in Gaza are hiding out in a bunker built by Israel, intelligence officials suspect. Many are believed to be in the basements of the Shifa hospital complex in Gaza City, which was refurbished during Israel's occupation of the Gaza Strip. Shifa, the coastal strip's largest hospital, was built while Gaza was under Egyptian rule before 1967. During the mid-1980s, the building underwent massive refurbishment as part of a showcase project to improve the living conditions of residents. Millions were invested in the project, which was overseen by Shmuel Goren, the coordinator for activities in the territories at the time. So Israel poured millions of its tax dollars into building this modern hospital, and it's been turned into a base for Hamas. So there you have it. So, Annie, I want to mention that Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State under Joe Biden, he went to Qatar. He went to the capital of Qatar, Doha, and he met with the dictator there. And can you go to Blinken's latest? Just go to, click on his name there and scroll down a bit. They show him meeting. There we go. Met with Qatar's Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs about the terrorist attacks in Israel and worked to prevent the conflict from spreading. Okay, and then scroll down a bit because I think he had a couple others there. Scroll down. There we go. Spoke with Qatar's Emir today, that's like their little king, about the terrorist attacks in Israel and the ongoing conflict with Hamas. And then here's just a line that I just can't even believe I'm reading. I expressed appreciation for Qatar's efforts to secure the return of hostages. Now, you know that Hamas is based in Qatar, funded by Qatar. Their leadership lives in Qatar. When they do videos, they sit in front of a green screen of Jerusalem, so it looks like they're in the zone. They are living in 5-star villas in Qatar. The favored, pampered, honored guests of that emir. The dictator of Qatar hosts the terrorists of Hamas. They were just down the street. And Joe Biden's Secretary of State goes to Qatar and expresses appreciation to them for all their help. Yeah, put that image up. So here's, I forget, is this guy's name Khaled Meshal? I can't remember all my terrorists. But you see it looks like he's in the region. That's a shot of Jerusalem. He's not in Ramallah, he's not in Jerusalem, he's not in Gaza. That is a green screen. He is in a luxury villa in Doha, Qatar. This is when he was calling for the Day of Rage. And Anthony Blinken goes to Qatar and says, hey man, you guys are really great. I really appreciate your help. We all care about this war. And here he is meeting with the head of the Palestinian Authority. Had the opportunity to meet with Palestinian Authority President Abbas to discuss the abhorrent terrorist attacks by Hamas against Israel. I detailed U.S. efforts to coordinate with partners to prevent the conflict from widening. Did you ask him to stop his terrorism? Did you ask anything? You gave appreciation to the dictator of Qatar, and you just talked with the dictator of the PLO. Did you ask for anything? What would Donald Trump have done? We don't know what Donald Trump would have done, but we can guess because he, for 4 years, conducted foreign policy, including in that part of the world. I think I know what he would have done. It's just a guess. You tell me. I think he would have gone to Qatar, or probably phoned them, and he would have said, hand over those terrorist leaders in the next 24 hours. He'd probably say, hand them over now. I have special forces ready to take them. Hand them over now, period. Not or else. He wouldn't have had to add the or else. He would have just said, hand them over now. Let me know if you have any problems with that. And I think he would have done so in a terrifying manner. He wouldn't have even had to say or else. Because the thing about Trump is, I mean, I think one of the most important moments in Donald Trump's foreign policy, and I don't know if you can find this, there's a picture of it. He's sitting at Mar-a-Lago, his mansion in Florida. He's having dinner with Xi Jinping, the Chinese dictator. So they're at his clubhouse, really. And yeah, show that. That's it. That's the one there. It's exactly it. That picture right there. Look at that. So they're sitting there in Mar-a-Lago. And I just want that picture of them. And they're having a bit of a boozy dinner, and it's super fun, and they're relaxed. Yeah, that's the one there. Perfect. You see how schmoozy that is? And while they're sitting there, while they're talking, when dessert comes, and I understand it was ice cream, 2 scoops. When dessert was coming, Trump fired a whack of Tomahawk cruise missiles at Syria. Yeah, show that image too. Just push the button, and he had it timed for dessert. He's talking to Xi Jinping, cool as a cucumber. They're telling jokes. He's probably telling some tall tales and some big stories. And over dessert, he fires a bunch of Tomahawk missiles at Bashar Assad in Syria. Just casually, just like he's ordering, would you like an after-dinner drink? Would you like a cappuccino? Would you like maybe a glass of port, maybe a cigar? Oh, by the way, fire a bunch of cruise missiles at Assad. The casual way in which he did it, like it's no big deal, like he does it all the time. He's not in the command bunker. This is so cash for him. It must have been shocking to Xi Jinping. And he must have had an aide rush up to him and whisper something in Chinese in his ear. By the way, President Trump has just fired these missiles. Like, it was the effect of that. And so I think every leader in the world knew one thing about Donald Trump. He was unpredictable, and he would smash things he didn't like. For example, he had, I think, like the number 2 general of Iran taken out with the special forces. What was his name? Soleimani? Did I remember his name correctly? I forget what Iran did, but I think it involved the death of an American. Qasem Soleimani. There it is. Yeah, put that on the screen. U.S. strike in Iraq kills Qasem Soleimani, commander of Iranian forces. Soleimani was planning attacks on Americans across the region, leading to an airstrike in Baghdad, the Pentagon statement said. Iran's supreme leader called for vengeance. Yeah, he called for vengeance, but he didn't really act on it, did he? If you can take out literally the boss, that would be like taking out General Milley in the United States. That would, when you take out the top guy with an attack. Yeah, there he is. He was the mastermind. When you take him out, you're sending a message that you're not going to just mess around by blowing up some cannon fodder troops. You're not going to blow up some arms depot, or you're not just going to detonate some apartment. You are going to take out the big boss, and maybe the Ayatollahs are next. And so Iran gnashed their teeth, but they didn't do a damn thing. That was Trump. Do you think that those pipsqueak OPEC dictators of Qatar, if Trump said, oh, by the way, you will hand over Hamas's commanders to me today, our special forces are waiting, please take us to them. They wouldn't have to be in or else, because everyone would know the or else will Soleimani you, or else will Tomahawk cruise missile you. And so it's, I think it was Roosevelt who said, walk softly and carry a big stick. But Trump walked noisily and carried a big stick, but because of that, he very rarely had to use it. The 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency were some of the most peaceful years in American history. Russia didn't try. Russia tried something before Trump, invaded Georgia, invaded Ukraine. Russia did not try that when Trump was president. Under Biden, Russia invaded Ukraine. China became bellicose. Do you think for a second that China would have sent that spy balloon over America if Trump were president? Like, seriously, can you flipping imagine what Trump would have done? It would have been creative, it would have been shocking, and Trump would have announced it with a comedic flourish. Hey, can you call up, go on YouTube, please, or I don't know if it's on Rumble, but maybe YouTube's a faster way to find it. Trump al-Baghdadi. So when they got the bad dude from ISIS, his name was Baghdadi, listening to Trump announce the assassination of the head of ISIS, great special forces operation, absolutely went for the top guy. Instead of saying, oh, hi, Emir of Qatar, we really appreciate your help. We're not going to ask you to do anything. We're not going to ask you to stop funding terrorism. We're certainly not going to ask you to hand over the terrorists. We're here to say how much we appreciate you. I just want you to listen for a minute about how Trump, like, he just killed the top ISIS guy. And the way he announces it, I don't think he meant to be funny. But frankly, his humorous and entertaining style would make it all the more terrifying for a bad guy, because they're thinking this guy's a madman. Here, just play a little bit of this. It's been a while since I've heard it, but I recall, like, the way he talked about it, it was like he was on The Apprentice or something. Play the clip.
He died like a dog. He died like a coward. He was whimpering, screaming, and crying. And frankly, I think it's something that should be brought out so that his followers and all of these young kids that want to leave various countries, including the United States, they should see how he died. He didn't die a hero. He died a coward, crying, whimpering, screaming, and bringing 3 kids with him to die, certain death. And he knew the tunnel had no end. I mean, it was a closed end. They call it a closed end tunnel. Not a good place to be.
So this was going on before you made the announcement that you're pulling
I've been looking for him for 3 years. I've been looking for him. I started getting some very positive feedback about a month ago. And we had some incredible intelligence officials that did a great job. That's what they should be focused on.
He died like a dog. He died whimpering. People should see it. Maybe it's actually, now that I listen to it again, it's not quite as amusing or entertaining, but it's quite non-standard, wouldn't you say? That's not normally how people talk about a million. And by the way, he talked about the 3 kids that died with him. Yeah, there wasn't all, oh my God, there might be a civilian casualty if we take out the leader of ISIS. But did you hear what he said? He said, I've been hunting him for 3 years. He died like a dog. He said that, right? He died like a dog, whimpering. People should see it. So he took out a top terrorist. But really, that video announcement was just as important, wasn't it? Because how many terrorists saw that and thought, I could be next. Maybe I'm not going to target Americans now. Compare that to Antony Blinken meeting with the head of Qatar and saying, hey guys, I know you're funding Hamas, and I know you're harboring them, but we just really, really appreciate you. And thanks so much for being a go-between here and negotiating. We appreciate you. Okay, we're going to go now. If Machiavelli was asked, which is better, to be feared or to be loved? And in that part of the world, it's the strong horse, as Osama bin Laden would say. And Donald Trump was the strong horse. I remember the New York Times said a story. Google New York Times, Donald the Strong. nytimes.com, and then Donald the Strong. You know, the Chinese give nicknames. Trump's a real nicknamer, isn't he? Yeah, that's the one there. Uncle Trump, that's the story there. So when Trump went to China, Trump really targeted China rhetorically, didn't he? And how did China take that? Did they disrespect him? Did they sneer at him? No, they actually treated him with more respect because he was so tough with them. This is an interesting story. I haven't read it in a while. You can see the headline, Uncle Trump finds fans in China. Uncle Trump. That's a I don't know if term of endearment is the phrase. Yeah, let me read the first paragraph there. So this is from 2017. This is his first year as president. Let me read a bit. I remember this. I haven't read this in a while, but I just remember this article because the New York Times hated Trump from the beginning. They hate him today, but they called it like they saw it here. Beijing. They call him Donald the Strong. They heap praise on his family. They fawn over his rapid-fire tweets. They have even created an online fan club. In America, President Trump faces a feisty press corps, damaging investigations into associates, and sagging approval ratings. But in China, where Mr. Trump arrived Wednesday, he has acquired a legion of admirers who hail him as a straight-talking politician and business mogul with a knack for deal-making. And they go on. They refer to him as scroll down, as Uncle Trump, Grand Commander, and Donald the Strong after Minister Trump's visit to the Forbidden City on Wednesday with President Xi Jinping. One fan wrote on social media, "Long live Emperor Trump." Mr. Trump's Chinese fans praise his irrepressible style, his skill as an entertainer, and his willingness to say what he thinks. Many also like the fact that he seems less inhibited than previous American presidents about recognizing China as a superpower and as an equal on the global stage. Okay, thanks very much. My point is, you wouldn't say Uncle Biden, you would say Grandpa Biden, but not in a good way. Would you ever say Biden the Strong? Would you ever say Grand Commander? You wouldn't say it because you wouldn't believe it. The whole thing about nicknames is that they have to have a ring of truth to them. That's why Trump is so devastating with the nicknames he gives people. You know, sometimes they're really weird nicknames, but they stick. Like Low Energy Jeb. Remember when Jeb Bush ran against Trump and Trump called him Low Energy Jeb? That's that's not even a nickname. No one would say that. But Trump did, and it stuck, and it just totally nailed his essence. Donald the Strong, Uncle Donald, Grand Commander. Yes, yes, yes. Look at Antony Blinken going to the same places and being absolutely weak. Hey, let me show you what's going on in Canada. So we talked about what's going on. You know, before we do that, I want to take a short commercial break. And I want to show you some of the other things we got going on here, Rebel News. We got a lot of stuff going on. We got events coming up. We got a cruise. We got a Rebel Live full-day conference. We got a Ben Shapiro event. We got a concert featuring Tamara Leach. You know, she's in a band. So we got a lot of stuff. Let me take a short break. I want to play some ads, but don't go away because the ads are cool. And then come back and I want to tell you what's going on the home front with the terrorist war, because that's even scarier. All right, see you in a minute.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. After years, I'm finally coming to Canada.
I'm a practicing internist and cardiologist. I've trained in epidemiology.
The FDA wanted to block the Pfizer dossier for 55 years.
50% of the lives at that time could have been saved. We were at about 250,000 deaths.
Red Deer, Thursday, November 9th. Get tickets at CanadiansForTruth.ca. See you Thursday, November 9th.
Do you want to start feeling like your pre-COVID self again? You're not alone. The wellness company's Spike Support Formula is an all-natural supplement to help people do just that. It was created by cardiologist Peter McCullough and his expert team of doctors to help the people experiencing effects from COVID and the you-know-what. Go to twccanada.health/rebel today.
Come on out November 25th. It's all aboard the Freedom Train in Niagara-on-the-Lake. You can check Rebel News for updates and also the Freedom Passport site.
Tamara Leach, who led the truckers' convoy, will be sharing the stage with some of the finest international recording artists, like the Chops Horns from New York City, who's played with Alicia Keys, Stevie Wonder, the Rolling Stones, and many more. Plus New World Sun, just off a European tour, and the legendary R&B master, Leroy Emanuel. Get on the Freedom Train with Tamara Leach. Saturday, November 25th at Niagara-on-the-Lake Central Community Center, 680 York Road. Get your tickets today at freedompassport.ca. The Freedom Train is coming. Know your rights, know your freedoms.
Hey, Ben Shapiro here. This November, the Wilberforce Project is bringing me to Canada. If you want to fight the woke machine destroying families, join me in Calgary for my talk, hosted by the Wilberforce Project. Go to benshapirolive.ca for info and tickets.
Hey, welcome back. I just heard in that short commercial break that our BC correspondent, Drea Humphrey, was at a Pierre Poilievre event and put a couple of questions to him about Hamas. So we should have that video in about 10 minutes for you. I look forward to playing that. I haven't seen it myself. I heard it just happened, so we'll look forward to that. We care about foreign affairs because we're interested in the world. As John Donne said, no man is an island. We are connected to the main. That's a wonderful poem. Do you know it? And it's very true about all things, but it's also true that charity starts at home, and we shouldn't care more about faraway places than we do about our own place. It's true. I think one of the reasons people like talking about foreign affairs is it's actually sort of, it's unreal in a way. You can have all sorts of opinions about someone else's place on the other side of the world because you'll never have to be accountable for your ideas. It's like an abstraction. It's like a hypothetical. But what goes on in our own neighborhoods is obviously vastly more important. I think that's one of the common sense rationales for Canada first, America first, any country first policy. You can care about things on the other side of the world, but you must care about your home more. And I think one of the most unnerving things about the terrorist war in Israel is that it is reverberating here in Canada because we have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas, militant is probably the wrong word, activists, people who are cheering the torture, the rape, the murder, people who are using words like intifada, which means pogrom or riot, who use the chant from the river to the sea, which means to drive out every Jew, extirpate and exterminate every Jew from Israel. Some of them go so far as to say things like gas the Jews, like they're just going full Nazi. And so I think my bigger worries about this war aren't just that I hate terrorism and I support Israel, the only democracy in the region, and that I am appalled by the brutality we've seen. Look here. Thousands of people at the Sydney Opera House. They're shooting flares at it, by the way. They're chanting attack. They're chanting gas the Jews, Allah Akbar. They're chanting these things. Fuck the Jews. They're burning flares. The Palestinian flag, the Lebanese flag. I don't recognize all those flags. I understand there was a Hamas terrorist flag as well. When you say fuck the Jews, you're not talking about Israel, because there's Jews in Sydney, there's Jews in Toronto, there's Jews around the West, and you're showing the true nature of these groups are not actually about Palestine or about the Gaza Strip. As I mentioned before, Israel withdrew every last soldier, every last citizen. They even dug up the Jewish graves in Gaza and moved them to Israel proper. 18 years ago, 18 years ago, Israel left the Gaza Strip. It has not been occupied. And yet Hamas continues to attack Israel from there. It's not about ending the occupation. It's about killing every Jew. And they say that. You saw what they were saying, death to the Jews. When they're rioting, when they're in San Diego, I don't know if you're able to call up San Diego and China. Let's do that for a second. That Hamas terrorist in Qatar, while Antony Blinken was saying, we really appreciate you guys, he was recording a video saying, all around the world we want a day of rage. And Hamas supporters around the world listened. San Diego, wonderful city, couldn't be further away from Israel. Like, it's so far away. It's far away geographically, it's far away politically, it's far away temperamentally. Like, San Diego and Hamas couldn't be more different. And they just saw some Israeli on the street and they beat him up. Just throw that video on the screen. Pro-Palestinian protesters beat an Israeli protester in San Diego. They just swarm him. Do you think that if they could, do you doubt that they would kill him? Maybe cut his head off? If it was a woman, do you doubt they would rape her? I mean, they have said these things, and they're out celebrating others who have done these things. Why would you not believe them? Here's another image of that. Look at that. That's in San Diego, which should concern us a lot. But even in China, there was an Israeli diplomat, and he was just stabbed on the street. And it was captured with a camera overhead. You can see that there. Just stabbed. Just attacked with a knife. You know, I saw a tweet today, and it was pretty simple. It said, you know what 3 countries don't have to worry about this day of rage? Hungary, Poland, and Japan. Hungary and Poland are near each other. Japan is not, but what do they have in common? They do not have mass immigration of people with different ideologies and worldviews. They just don't. I think I told you yesterday I was in Hungary this summer, and I went to an enormous synagogue. Door was open. There's no cop there. There's no metal detector. And I said to a Jewish teenager, I said, what's it like? And the words he said were, it's easy to be Jewish in Hungary. In fact, I think the World Jewish Congress had their convention in Budapest and said the 2 best cities to be Jewish in Europe are Rome and Budapest. Certainly not Paris. Oh, and there was a stabbing in Paris today. I forgot to mention. Yeah, put that on the screen. Teacher killed in France school stabbing. This is the BBC, so let's see how they describe it. Police say the situation is now under control. Oh, that's good. A teacher has been killed and 2 people seriously injured in a knife attack at a school in France. The attack happened at Gambetta High School in the northern city of Arras at about 11 local time. The attacker has been arrested and is now in custody. Witnesses say he shouted Allahu Akbar, or God is greatest, during the attack. Visiting the school, President Macron condemned the barbarity of Islamist terrorism. Well, I'm shocked that they even reported that Allah Akbar part or used the word Islamist terrorism, but again, they're quoting other people. That's the rule of thumb that BBC, CBC, and others have. They simply will not say the word terrorist unless they sort of have to because they're quoting a newsmaker, but they will not say it themselves. Oh, you know what? CTV did something. Can you find my tweet on that? CTV, they're just liars. They're so weird. They covered the story, and they said something like, "This is very rare." What? France has more terrorist attacks, Islamic terrorist attacks, than any other country in Europe. It is very difficult to be Jewish there. When I was in Paris a few years ago, I went to a Jewish grocery store, and there were paramilitary cops outside with submachine guns, like M16 or something. Like you have to live under armed guard if you're a Jew there. Here, yeah, put that on the screen for a second. So CTV said, French media, scroll up so they can see the whole tweet. French media say a teacher was killed and others injured in a rare school stabbing. No mention of Hamas, no mention of the Day of Rage, no mention of Allah Akbar. But they say it's a rare school stabbing. This is just a school stabbing. It's very rare. And scroll up, here's my response. I say, CTV just will not stop lying. A rare attack, and then I quote sort of a compendium of terrorist attacks, with at least 82 Islamist attacks and 332 deaths. France remains the country most affected by Islamic terrorism within the EU. Why does CTV keep lying, and why are all their lies pro-Hamas? It's so weird. Oh, can you also, Global News had a story also that was similar. It was so weird. Like, why are they doing this? Why not just report? Global had a headline, and I've seen Day of Jihad, and I've seen Day of Rage. Global News called it Day of Action. And I read the entire story that they linked to. It wasn't called Day of Action, and I rewatched the original statement by the Hamas terrorist announcing it. He didn't say Day of Action. Global News literally changed Day of, that's it right there. That's it right there. So scroll down and show what they said. They said, a Vancouver area Jewish organization is raising safety concerns amid reports Hamas has called for a day of action on Friday amid the escalating conflict in Israel and Palestine. Day of action. Oh, I see now that they've got a reader's community notes under that. Former Hamas leader Khaled Meshal called for a day of jihad. So scroll up a bit. Here's what I said. That note wasn't on there when I said, you anti-Semitic liars, Hamas called for a day of rage, but you changed that, calling it a day of action. You refused to call Hamas a terrorist group, and you literally changed their words to lie to your viewers. Izzy Asper would despise what his network has become. I had the pleasure of meeting Izzy Asper before he passed away. He was a very liberal guy, very friend to all, Jewish guy, as the name implies. He built Global News from scratch. And here it is, defending Hamas. I wish Izzy were around because he would be just firing on all pistons, but I'm also sort of glad that he didn't live to see this absolute disgrace. And by the way, that wasn't a typo. That was an editorial decision, just like it's an editorial decision not to say terrorists. Unbelievable. I want to show you, though, what scares me. What scares me, I'm a little bit scared by Hamas terrorists, but I'm much more scared by terrorist sympathizers here, like you saw in San Diego, who absolutely support what Hamas is doing. Here's a clip from an Edmonton high school. Kids just going out and showing, some kids go and cheer for their sports team. But these kids at high school in Edmonton go cheer for murder, rape, and torture. Just take a look. Yeah, imagine being a Jewish kid at that school. If you have mass, I once heard the saying, mass immigration, democracy, liberalism. Choose any two. And I sort of turned that puzzle around in my mind for a bit. I think of Singapore. They don't have mass immigration, but they have, it's very multiracial, very multicultural. And they are fairly liberal. It's a benign dictatorship, but it's not a democracy. Dubai. I just came back from Dubai. Multiracial. Fairly liberal, probably the most liberal place in the Muslim world, but not a democracy. Because if you allow people to come to the country who do not believe in liberal values, who do not believe in the equality of men and women, who do not believe in religious pluralism, who do not believe in the separation of mosque and state, and who believe that violence is a way to solve a problem, if you bring people in and do not vet for those values, and you bring in 1,000 and then 10,000 and 100,000 and then 1 million, and even if most would not rally, although there's obviously an enormous amount of peer pressure to do so, you will have a critical mass. And we saw in Toronto and in other cities, people chanting support for terrorists. And what are you going to do now? In the cities with large pro-Hamas populations, the mayors and the MPs are too cowardly to say anything. That's what I'm worried about. Here in Toronto, I went to a Jewish school 20 minutes away from our office, where 3, I think they were teenagers, came by and started threatening the Jews. They were arrested. They weren't senior Hamas operatives. They were just young Muslim men who walked by a Jewish school, identified some Jews, and actually I understand they threw a rock through a car window. That's what I heard later. So it's one thing to try and protect. Yeah, just throw this on the screen. Let's throw some sound up. Put some sound up. We won't play this whole thing, but here's my report from yesterday. Go ahead and put the sound up.
Against kids, Jewish kids from this school. Here's how the head of school, Jonathan Levy, described it at an impromptu press conference a few moments ago.
Unfortunately, there was an incident that took place near our campus today. What happened was that a number of individuals targeted some of our students with threats. There was no violence, and there were no injuries, thankfully. But uttering threats is, of course, illegal and a problem.
So what's happened to these people? What did you do?
So our security responded, called 911. Police responded very quickly. And for our procedure, they called 911. Police have arrived quickly, for which we are very grateful. And an investigation is now underway with possible charges pending.
The police were here and everyone's on heightened alert. We spoke to a couple of kids. Now, it's our practice not to interview minors, so we've blurred their faces and we're not using their names. I thought they were spot on, asking why would Jews in Toronto be targeted for a geopolitical quarrel around the world? I think the answer is obvious, because it's not just a geopolitical quarrel. Hamas hates Jews, full stop. It's not just against Israel or for Gaza or whatever. They simply are the new Nazis. That's my answer, but here's how the kids put it.
Sure, I just think personally it's horrible what's going on, and I just don't understand how you can do this stuff to a high school, let alone the whole Israeli and Palestinian conflict is its own thing, and this isn't part of that. This is just pure terrorism, and I just think it's horrible what's going on.
And how about yourself?
Yeah, I think like the only word to describe this is terrorism. It's the only thing that's happening here. You can't describe it any other way. And yeah, personally, I don't feel very safe here. Like clearly, with everything going on, it's just chaos right now. There were people running through the halls. It was just we heard stuff about bricks, and then we heard the cars being smashed, and then we heard the threats, and just everything going on. Honestly, it's just horrible. Like we're a high school, a bunch of kids, and I don't see what we have to do with any of this kind of. And I don't understand why people would be doing this to us.
Here's a few more details from the head of school, Jonathan Levy. What other things would you like the Toronto police to do? Can they do more, and have they offered to do more?
Toronto police have been very responsive, have had a wonderful presence here. We're really grateful for what they're doing. They've been here much of the day today. They've been here at other times. They are supporting us, they are advising us, and we're really appreciative for their expertise in this very difficult situation.
Let me ask you, you spoke in generalities that the police are being supportive, but is there anything specific? For example, will there be police here on a regular basis?
There will be enhanced security. Obviously, we're not going to get into specific details of any security protocols, but there will and has been enhanced security at the school.
Look, I don't know how you protect soft targets like a Jewish school. I was in Budapest, Hungary lately, in front of an enormous synagogue, and there's schools and Jewish summer camps, and I asked the kids how they could do this with no security, and they said life is very easy to be a Jew in Hungary. And the obvious reason why is because there are not hundreds of thousands or millions of migrants to Hungary from countries where anti-Semitism is taught and propagated. Canada took a different path, and we brought over hundreds of thousands, indeed it's now millions of people from places in the world where anti-Semitism is the formal doctrine, from Afghanistan, from Syria, from other places, and they were invited to Canada on the premise that they would assimilate and integrate, but no one actually vetted anyone. No one actually insisted on integration. Multiculturalism in 2023 doesn't mean integration or assimilation, it means pockets and ghettos. Here's footage that we filmed a few days ago at what has been dubbed Gaza Plaza. This is not in Gaza, though. It's in Mississauga on the outskirts or part of the Greater Toronto area. Take a look. It's not just in the Greater Toronto area. Here's some footage that our reporter Sheila Gunn-Reid filmed from Edmonton, Alberta. You wouldn't imagine it from Edmonton. Well, you don't need to imagine it. Take a look for yourself at the celebration of murder. There have been these pro-Hamas rallies all across the country, in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa. And if someone is willing to stand up and shout the word intifada, which really means riot or pogrom, if someone is willing to use the Palestinian chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which means to totally eradicate the entire state of Israel and those within it, if someone's willing to chant, as they did in Sydney, gas the Jews, did you see that? If someone's willing to say that, are they willing to act on it? We know that there are thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people in Canada who were thrilled by the murder and torture and rape that they observed in Gaza. There was no tangible success for the Palestinian people. They did not get any closer to a negotiated settlement. They did not acquire one more square foot of land. They are no closer to establishing a state. In fact, in many ways, they're further away from it. The only news in the past week was the barbarism of the murders of women and children and the rape and torture and humiliation. And that pure evil is what was celebrated in these rallies across Canada. Now, we heard the head of school here talk about hate crimes, and we've heard the police chief in this city talk about hate crimes. And
With regard to hateful behavior.
you know, I won't play the rest of that clip. In fact, you could hear I was echoing some of the things on the show today. But I was at that school, and there were some threats against kids, and then I later found out they actually threw rocks and smashed some windshields. I wouldn't call that organized. I wouldn't call those people terrorists. I would say they were motivated by anti-Jewish hatred, of course. But I suppose it was a kind of terrorism, but I think it was a crime of opportunity. They saw some Jews. They had been excited about the violence overseas. Thought they'd get into it. You can see, why don't you show the picture of that kid? I don't know if he's a kid. I don't know how old that perp is there, that suspect. Is he a teenager? Is he in his 20s? I have no idea how old that person is. We might find out if charges are laid. But I don't think that's like a terrorist operative. I think that's just someone like those Harry Ainsley high school kids in Edmonton who got whipped up, excited by murder and rape. Their community leader praised murder and rape, and they want to be part of the community and part of the family and part of the team, and so they're for murder and rape. And one day they won't just cheer about it, one day they'll do it. And it'll perhaps be opportunistic, or perhaps they'll be, professionals at it. But either way, it's violence. There were kids yesterday in Toronto who were threatened. And according to a report I heard from two different people, there was rocks thrown through windows. That's different than being murdered or raped, of course. But I can tell you that terrified a lot of people here in Canada. We are no longer fireproof house far away from flammable materials. And how do you fix that problem? That's my point earlier about the F-35s and the carrier battle groups and the Merkava tanks. And how does that stop a problem of evil in the heart of too many people? Our friend Drea Humphrey on the West Coast was at an event with Pierre Poilievre, and I think she had a chance to put some questions to her. I haven't had a chance to look at the video, but why don't we play it now and as we wrap up our podcast. Let's take a look at that.
I have another question about the pro-Hamas protests that have been taking place. We've been seeing them across the nation pop up, including in Vancouver. And as you mentioned about the Day of Rage that's planned for today, we also see that more are scheduled, including in Vancouver, with little to no consequence for organizers or attendees. In contrast, as you well know, when everyday Canadians gathered in front of our parliament to oppose things like vaccine mandates in the Freedom Convoy, the Emergencies Act was invoked to crush their protest as well as to freeze bank accounts, etc. If your party forms government, what will it do to ensure that such an egregious double standard doesn't take place for who has the right to protest in our country?
That's a very good question, an excellent question, in fact. Justin Trudeau's and the NDP's imposition of the Emergencies Act to crush the civil liberties of Canadian citizens was one of the most despicable acts we've seen under his government. I will ensure that never happens again. I will protect people's freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of expression. We will make Canada the freest country in the world. And at the same time, I will exercise my freedom to condemn anyone who celebrates the murder of little babies, of grandmothers, the rape of mothers, that has unfolded in the Middle East because of the evil of Hamas. No Canadian should stand with an evil, sadistic, terrorist death cult like Hamas. People are free to have their own opinions, but I'm free to condemn those opinions as a citizen myself. And we also know that under the law, Hamas is a terrorist enterprise. It's criminal to provide material support to Hamas. So I want to make sure the police enforce the law by investigating and charging anyone who provides money, organization, or other support to help Hamas carry out terrorist attacks against civilians or anyone else.
It's a good answer. I think it could go farther. As I've mentioned several times, and maybe I should do a show on this, our criminal code has special provisions against support for terrorist groups. So yeah, free speech. He emphasized free speech, and I'm glad he did, by the way. I wouldn't want Canada put under martial law because people were saying, kill the Jews. I think those people should be outed, denormalized. If they're foreign citizens, they should be deported. But I think if anyone is actually helping Hamas, as defined in the criminal code, fundraising for them, recruiting for them, supporting them in a material way, they should be prosecuted as terrorists. And I haven't heard anyone talk about that. I've heard people talk about hate crimes. But the criminal code also has these special terrorist crimes. But I think it starts with condemnation. And that's what's so terrifying, is so many institutions are not condemning the support for barbarism. They're defending it. Well, it's 2:12 Eastern Time. What a pleasure to be with you on this live stream. I hope you found it interesting. I encourage you to continue to check in with our various websites, including the specialty website we've set up for our friend Avi overseas in Israel, thetruthaboutthewar.com. And he couldn't be closer to it. Holy moly, to see that drone overhead and to duck into the bomb shelter. Play that video one more time. And I tell you, the courage there. And you can see our cameraman Benji, and they duck into one of those bomb shelters. Like I say, in Strot, every block, like there must be 500 bomb shelters in Strot, just every single block, every bus shelter, because that's what it's like when they start to attack. Let's play that video. The first 2 minutes of it, at least. It's just so incredible to have a guy on the ground, and his bulletproof vest is coming. Let's take a look.
Avi Mini for Rebel News in Beri, Israel, hundreds of meters from the site of the musical festival in which Hamas hunted and slaughtered, kidnapped and raped partygoers who were there to celebrate peace. Now, at the moment here, things are really tense. Even just standing at the checkpoint, conducting interviews, there was overhead drones, one firing about 150 meters from us.
We are the ones that are...
Slightly shaken from the explosion, we waited a few moments until it seemed like the threat had passed and continued our interview when suddenly shooting began.
And once...
Gunfire. Gunfire.
There's some active launch in
Gunfire.
As we were trying to figure out what was happening ahead, I noticed a drone above and bolted for the bomb shelter nearby.
There's a drone.
תנסו להוריד אותו, יש למישהו נשק, תירה בו! תירה בו!
I got it.
למה אתה לא יורה?
למה? Got no visual.
זה מעלת מתאבד, הוא יורד עכשיו. מי עומד באיזה מישהו אחר מאנטארקטיקה?
They're coming back around.
Where is it?
There we go, they're starting to shoot it. It seems like they managed to shoot it down. That's the first time we've been close enough from a shelter to actually get in there in time. But this is the situation here, and it does not look like it's settling down anytime soon.
All right, we'll have more from Avi. We have a special report he just put together and just filed to us. I'm not sure if we can even tease a few seconds of it, or does it need more work? Needs to be added. Okay, well, we'll have that tonight on the Ezra Levant Show, which is at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The podcast is free, but to subscribe to the premium show, as we call it, just go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month. I do a show every day. I'm doing this live stream. I'm enjoying it, but every night at 8 p.m. Eastern, I do a show, I do a long monologue, and then I typically interview a guest, although this week we're having Avi do the guest segments because they're so interesting. Hey, I just want to give a shout out to the folks who chipped in for the Rumble Rants and the Super Chats. Lori, 6602, chips in $20, thank you, and says, thank you, Rebel News. We get truth from you. I appreciate that. Anthony Laferd chips in a couple bucks. Hey, Ezra, with the reports of Egypt warning Israel about the potential of Hamas planning an attack, do you think Bibi Netanyahu intentionally ignored warnings if reports are true? I've heard that he was given the heads up and did not act on it. I find that confusing, and I think that demands a detailed explanation. Was the warning from Egypt substantial? Was it actionable? Was it reliable? I can imagine that there's rumors and tips all the time. Was it assessed properly? Why was it rejected? Who on the Israeli side got it? It's stunning to me that Israel, which is known, famous for its intelligence networks, didn't detect this either through human sources or electronic sources. So that is obviously an incredibly important question to ask. And it reminds of the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago, where on a Jewish holiday just like this time, in fact, it was 50 years to the day, it's on the anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, where Israel was invaded by surprise and almost lost, frankly. And there was a massive intelligence failure, and that caused a reckoning in the Israeli military, espionage, security, intelligence community. And I think that the same thing needs to be done here. I think that's all the Super Chats and the Rumble Rants, so I thank you for that. I'm going to sign off now until tonight. On behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, to you at home, goodbye, and keep fighting for freedom.
Hi, thank you. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News. In the last 4 years, Canada has committed $90 million worth of support to UNRWA Aid, an organization that in the past has been linked to Hamas terrorists' use to store missiles and other weapons intended to harm Israeli people in UNRWA schools and hospitals. On Tuesday, the Government of Canada announced it will be continuing with millions of dollars of funds and aid, claiming they will ensure none of that will go to aiding Hamas. If your party is to form government, will you commit to ending funds to the Hamas-linked UNRWA organization?
We will end all foreign aid to terrorists, dictators, and wasteful multinational bureaucracies. One of my first actions as Prime Minister will be to carry out a full review of every dollar